840, Big 550 KTRS. We've got David Stokes with us, Show Me Institute policy analyst with us here in studio. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
Story in the Kansas City Star has piqued your interest this morning.
Right, and I read it on johncombest.com, if I can plug a buddy's website there. But it's a very interesting story by Steve Rose about the number of legislators in Kansas and Missouri, and the article has a Kansas focus, but the Missouri point is exactly the same, that don't have college degrees. And he finds it jolting, I think is his term, that he apparently thinks the fact that 28% of Missouri legislators, state senate and state house, don't have college degrees, he finds that to be a high number, and he finds that to be surprising.
Right.
I don't think it's actually a particularly high number. I think 72% of any institution with college degrees is much more than most organizations.
Right.
A lot of people think that everybody out there has a college degree. In fact, most Americans do not have one.
It's an elitist position to think everybody has a college degree.
Or should have to have a college degree.
Or should have to, or needs one.
Absolutely. Or
Right.
can only be an effective legislator with them. If we go right to what he's writing about, I think you can absolutely be an effective legislator without having a college degree. And I think the idea that we should only vote for, and he doesn't come out that far and say it, but he certainly insinuates at it, that there's something wrong with having elected officials without college degrees, and I disagree with that strongly.
However, let me play a little devil's advocate here. It sort of leads into the idea that if you're not educated, can you make an educated decision? And I think we can all agree that, of course, if you're not officially educated and you don't have that diploma at the end, you can still make an educated decision. But with that being said, many times people with college degrees don't make educated decisions, i.e. Tim Jones, Speaker of the House, has a law degree, and he still wants to beat up everybody and sue everybody. So we can question his decision-making, and he has a degree. And that was a McGraw-Milhaven comment, not a David Stokes comment. But if you are educated, you are more apt to see somebody else's side. You're more apt to be at least knowledgeable enough to know that someone's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, maybe. If you're educated, you might have a better understanding of things that you wouldn't otherwise have an understanding of.
I think that's true in many cases. The alternate side to that is, and I don't remember which University of Chicago economist said this, the problem with the idea that we can only elect smart people to office, and by smart people I mean really, really smart people, Rhodes Scholars level. The problem with only electing people like that to office, related to the idea that we can only elect people with college degrees to the Missouri legislature, is the idea that it's the really smart people who think they can square the circle. Mm-hmm. It's the really smart people who think, well, I know big government doesn't work there, but I'll make it work. I'll come up with a new program for this or a new program for that, and I'll solve these problems and use government authority because, my friends and I here, we're smart enough to do it. When the fact is, if the people serving don't have an understanding of the complicated things government is doing, well, maybe government shouldn't be doing those things in the first place.
Right.
Maybe government has expanded too far, and that's the real problem.
I will also say that I want a diverse group making my laws, and that includes people who are not quote unquote educated. Right? I want people who have high school diplomas. I want one or two people who don't have any high school diplomas for whatever reason. Who are smart in business but had to drop out to take care of the farm because mom or dad got sick or something. I want educated people. I want some lawyers. I don't want all lawyers. I want a diverse, and I know that's some liberal weird word, but I want a diverse group of people to come together and actually have a conversation and discuss things. What I'm more worried about is the term limits, because the term limits are in and out, and really the people with the power down in Jefferson City are the bureaucrats who aren't term limited out, who steer these people in all sorts of directions because they're there forever.
The bureaucrats and the lobbyists who the same argument applies to. And so let me take both of your points. I agree completely on the first point. When we have a diverse group making, when you pass a law, it is, at least in theory, supposed to apply to everybody.
Right.
Now, we certainly pass way too many laws that are only designed to give a special tax cut to this company or only applies to that county but not the other counties.
Right.
So, but let's leave that aside. Yes, we want a diverse group of lawmakers trying to represent everybody's interest, and hopefully we have more people then saying, well, giving the faults that are going to come with these, so maybe we have less laws being passed in such a scenario. And as to the second point, I do think it's a problem. I support term limits. I've always supported term limits, but I'd like to see a slight lengthening of their term. I've always thought 12 years was better than 8, so we alleviate the rush to move on to higher office because you're there so shortly. And by every account, it takes your first term, at least in the House, to figure out what's going on at all. Mm-hmm. So you really only have 2 or 3 at the most sessions as an effective legislator. So term limits have been good for the state. I want to keep them. But I think we can all agree there is a downside to it.
Would you be in favor? There's some talk about turning, because it's 8 in the House and 8 in the Senate. Would you be in favor of having 16 in either or both? So, in other words, somebody spends 16 years in the House as opposed to wanting to switch over to the Senate after 8 years.
Yeah, I am. Yes, I am generally in favor of something like that because I think there's something to be gained from historic knowledge. There's something to be gained from the wisdom of being somewhere for a while. So if you're in the House and you do a good job and everybody in your district thinks you should move up to the Senate, well, then you're starting over from scratch in the Senate. I think if we have a general 16-year cap, then we still address the problem of people who are there forever and just start phoning it in, which is why we have term limits in the first place and which is a legitimate issue. But it also allows us at 16 years in either body to keep that institutional knowledge, and I think our democracy would benefit from that.
I am inherently against term limits because I think we have term limits every time we hold an election.
Right. The frightening fact, though, is in the state of Missouri, let's take out of our 163 House seats, there's really probably only about 25 of them that aren't guaranteed for one party or the other.
Well, that's not the voters' fault. That's the politicians gaming the system.
Well, it's only partly. Remember, the maps we are using right now were drawn by judges. I mean, these weren't maps done by the politicians in this current round. It sort of happens naturally as people choose to live around people who think like they do.
Right.
So we get this sort of natural gerrymandering. So we really don't have all that many offices which are open for play. There's probably 3 or 4 state rep seats in St. Louis County and maybe 2 state Senate seats that really either party has a chance of winning. So, that's.
But where does it say in the Constitution that if John Deal it says it, but I mean where does it say
in the part under term limits?
In the parts well, where does it say that if I want to vote for John Deal again, why am I not allowed to vote for John Deal again? That seems almost inherently unpatriotic and undemocratic.
Well, if you go back to when term limits were passed in many states around the country in the early 90s to mid-90s, it happened because people were really tired of politicians who'd been in office for a long, long time who were so strong within their party, so they were guaranteed to win their primary, and they represented districts that had no chance of switching anyway. So for every occasional earthquake like we saw in Virginia last week, a political earthquake, using air quotes, it's still very, very rare and far more common is people who get in office are dedicated servants for a few terms and start phoning it in and stay forever. And that's what term limits were designed to address. And I think it is a legitimate thing to address.
Yeah, I think Jane Duker's point of doesn't matter what I vote for now because in 5 years when this takes effect, I'm not going to be around and you can't hold me accountable because I'm long gone. So there's no accountability to these people because whatever they vote for today, if it's good or bad, I can't throw them out of office and they're not beholden to their answers or to their votes because they're not there anymore.
And there's some good things that can come from that, too. Let me propose the St. Louis Board of Aldermen voting to have themselves from 28 members to 14. The only way they were able to do that was back in, I think, 2011, say this will take place in 2020. most of us will be gone from this board. We need
Right.
to make this change.
Well, they also did that
let's do
because-
it. But more often, your point is the applicable one.
Right, and the aldermen did that because they have to redraw the maps, and the next time they redraw the maps is the next census, which was 2020.
Right.
David Stokes, when can we read you? When can we see you?
Well, you can read a lot about. We do cover like political science topics from time to time. I write about government structure at Show Me Institute, and you can see my old Government in Missouri paper and many more current versions of it at showmeinstitute.org, and you can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
Have a good day.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks, Kelly.
Where'd you graduate from college?
Fairfield University in Connecticut, not far from your birthplace there, McGraw.
I know quite a few people who went to Fairfield.
We had a lot of Long Islanders.
Did you go to law school
One
there?
freaky accent.
Yeah. Did you go to law school there? Where'd you go to law school?
I'm not a lawyer.
Oh, that's why I like you. All right, that makes a lot more sense. All right. Thank you, David Stokes.